I wasn't expecting that.
No,
Goodness.
it was, yeah, all of a
I mean,
sudden
a little
there
bit, it was like a sun shower early. I'm like, okay. But then later, it like poured.
It did, and it did so for quite a while.
It did. I was not, I mean, I'm grateful for it, but.
Yeah.
Oh, where's Dave? Hi.
My son took his son up for
Yeah.
son up to get his passport. That's little Noel's passport picture. He's not even 2 months old. And sitting there saying,
See, looking at you and looking at me. Question, who's that? Who's that?
yeah, a little wandering eye there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this is our second grandson.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the board meeting, special board meeting at EVIT on this grand day of March 7th, 2024. Just a information meeting, basically. And Dr. Doolin, would you like to do the pledge?
Dr. Doolin.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. President, if I could just ask 1 second.
Yes.
Ms. Boggs, are you able to see clearly as, Mr. Boyle, are you able to see clearly, hear clearly?
No,
I can only hear.
I can't see you. I can only sort of hear.
Yeah,
Can't-
sorry, there's like a buzz or something.
Okay, we're gonna hold for a second and see if we can't get you all fixed up.
What? Just to let you know, you're missing some good cookies.
Yep. Mr. Boyle?
I did hear that.
These are your cookies. Or let's say they were your cookies.
Thank you. We'll enjoy them. You've already eaten yours. You can have some.
I have, what can I say?
I've got water too.
I'm gonna steal Mr. Boyle's water. What?
Since this is going to be an information and discussion question, if you have a question, just go ahead and ask it to Dr. Wilson because he'll be in charge.
We're gonna make sure these guys are.
I'm only in charge of opening and closing.
Mr. Lane. Still Mr. Lane. Hello, Mr. Boyle.
You gonna put them back?
I didn't touch the cookies.
Oh,
I didn't
sure.
take his water though. Do you have extra water? Yeah.
Well, here's Mr. Lane. He better put his water back.
Shameful.
She's got an extra one.
Shameful. I should have.
Okay.
I thought I was being cute. How are you, Mr. Lane?
Hello, how are you?
You got here just in time. I was gonna steal your cookies here then.
Oh, well.
Tammy-
Wouldn't be the worst thing to ever
Tammy
happen.
gave me an empty plate with cookie crumbs on it, so I guess
You inhaled them.
Say what? Leaving, Tuesday, coming back Thursday, so. Not, yes. Okay. So, Mr. President, members of the governing board, they're working on changing out the device. so that those on Zoom are able to hear and see. If that doesn't work, then they may have to shut that Zoom link out and restart it again. So we're going to be on a little bit of a standby for a minute. The Zoom and the link. I mean, the audio and the video on the Zoom calls. Yeah, listen, I'm about 2 steps from there, Mr. Watkins. That's actually, I'm just buying time for you. I'm just stalling for you, but my stall turned out to be.
Frankenhauser.
Check, check.
At least we're not the ones sweating.
Check, check. Can you hear that audio?
Mr. Boyle, can you hear that? Is that better? Or Ms. Boggs?
Mr. Boyle, are you muted?
No, I don't think he's muted. I think it's still not.
We're also working on the video, but the audio seems to be good now.
But I don't know that we can hear Mr. Boyle.
We heard him earlier. Huh.
You can hear him back in there.
Let's put a microphone back there. There's more than one way to solve a question. Okay, we hear you.
Oh, he's jogging.
All right.
That fixed it.
Time for a cookie.
Mr. Boyle? No, not out on the speakers. We can't.
Okay.
Can we put a mic back there for us to hear up here?
Can we do a sound check from the other end, Mr. Boyle? Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh,
Okay.
Mr. Boyle, that was music to my ears. We heard your voice.
Oh, good. Well, hello, everyone.
Can you see us, Mr. Boyle?
Yes, I can.
Ms. Boggs, can you see us?
I cannot see you, but I can hear you.
There, Shelly, I see them on a different screen than I hear them on, so I don't know if that's gonna help for you or not.
I just see you, Peter.
Oh.
That's it.
Just me.
That's all you need.
And I think Amber is on as well. I see McAfee on this. Well, the name says McAfee on the screen.
I'm here. I can see you, Peter. I can see a boardroom, but I can't click on it to get any bigger.
Guess Carlos is going to have to pay our fee today. $0. The extra time we're putting in.
They got 2 different sessions running.
So, Mr. President, members of the governing board, Ms. McAfee, Ms. Boggs, Mr. Boyle, you can hear us. Mr. Boyle, you can see us. Ms. Boggs, you can't. Ms. McAfee, you can't. Would you all like us to continue to work towards a solution, or would you like us to proceed?
I'm fine as is.
Yeah, I'm good just hearing, as long as we don't have to,
Yeah, thumbs
there's
up.
charts or anything we need to see. That might be a problem.
I'm assuming that you got the handout that
Now
we
we
gave.
do have that.
You have that. That's
I
all you
have
need.
that. You guys
Okay.
have it.
All right. I think we're good to
Okay.
go, Mr. President.
All right, you're on, Dr. Wilson.
Oh.
Item 3.
Wow, that was anticlimactic. Mr. President, members of the governing board, I appreciate your willingness to come in on an off day for a meeting, especially at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. One of the things that's important to me is that when you're going to be asked to make decisions, significant decisions like salary compensation for our staff members and our employees, that you have an opportunity to hear the information, ask questions, then have the opportunity to process the information, and then if necessary, ask more questions so you can be in a position that you feel really comfortable making a decision on Monday night. So I thank you for taking the time to come in today and at least start this discussion. One of the things that I'm very appreciative of as the superintendent of EVIT is the governing board's willingness over the past 5 years to really take a look at our compensation and make sure that we are at or above our neighboring districts, and that we are at or above other CTEDs, and that we are as aggressive as we can be in terms of competing for employees in the private sector. There was a history in the organization in which that really wasn't the mindset, and so we were significantly behind. And over the last 5 years, you all have done, I think, an incredible job trying to right the ship, and you've done that in a number of different ways. Over the past 5 years, you have provided high school teachers a salary increase of close to 44% over the last 5 years. On the support staff, you've provided a salary increase of about 23%. Now that 23% strikes a little bit of an odd tone or tune compared to the 44%, because one of the things that we talk about here is that we're all one EVIT, right? It takes the whole of the ship to sail. It takes all of the crew to sail the ship. So that 23% for the support staff was purely in salary increases. In addition to that, though, you took the opportunity multiple times over the last several years to rearrange a lot of our support staff. So the rearranging wasn't part of the quote salary increases. What we did is we did a market analysis, and if a position here had a like position in the private sector, were we competitive in our salary schedule? And if not, then we rearranged that position to be competitive. That was in addition to the 23% increase. And so there were some in the support staff that received significantly more than the 23% because of the rearranging. I have not done a good enough job explaining that to our faculty and to our staff, and so I plan to do so over the next couple of days. One of the things that you have done, and I appreciate you doing, is that you have allowed the support staff to participate in the placement compensation. So remember, the placement compensation is compensation that is provided to all employees based on the number of students that are placed in jobs or post-secondary schools that allow us to have the ability to stand on the stool that says, you come to us, we prepare you, we certify you, and then we shepherd you into that year 13 opportunity. And it oftentimes the state funds, well, not oftentimes, the state funds the placement dollars for our teachers, but you as a governing board have also provided that same funding for our support staff, because the belief is, which I believe to be true, the placement is not just the product of a classroom instructor. The placement is also the product of the counselor, and also the product of the counselor is able to be successful because our technology is running efficiently, or our teacher is able to be successful because our facilities and classroom are above others. So the placement for the support staff has also been provided. Last year's about $4,000. So when we talk about the support the governing board has provided over the past 5 years for both high school staff and support staff, it has come in the form of not only compensation to the tune of 44% increase to high school teachers, 23% increase to support staff. In addition to that, a rearranging of many support staff positions that would significantly increase their compensation, as well as the ability for all staff to participate in placement. I share all that with you because providing recommendations for compensation or compensation packages is always a tricky deal for me as a superintendent, because quite honestly, I wish that we could give all of our staff significantly more than what they're making. And that doesn't mean that you all haven't done a nice job. That's why I did my word salad for the last 3 minutes, to really make you feel like I recognize you've done a good job. But I just believe that as an organization, our teachers do what other organizations either can't or won't. And when we talk about changing lives, our support staff leans in and helps us change lives by the role and responsibility that they participate in. And I wish that we could provide, compensation significantly larger than what we're potentially able to provide. But there's also a responsibility I believe I have as a superintendent of giving recommendations that not only are fair in terms of compensation, but also protects the organization in some ways, right? Because at the end of the day, we still have to pay bills outside of salary and benefits. And we are still in the process of making sure that we have enough revenue to continue to expand and do our remodeling. We know that we're a school of choice, and a school of choice means that people have to want to come here. And we're currently enrolling and growing at a rate that the organization has never experienced before. And that's a compliment to the work that we're doing. But that growth increase creates more revenue. But at the same time, because we're a school of choice, that can shift the other way pretty quickly. And we want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves to have the resources to navigate whether a down year in growth, or the resources that capable for us to continue our expansion or remodeling of the Power Campus and the main campus. So what is in front of you tonight are three different options, and And again, as a governing board, y'all can come up with your own options. This is just a starting point that I wanted to at least get you started off or in. Three different options, and those three different options include a % increase for high school instructors, a % increase for support staff. On this is not our adult education or administration. So after Monday, hopefully you have made decisions that allow us to generate contracts for all employees with the exception of adult staff and administrative positions. You'll see that in the options that are being provided, option A has a 5% increase for high school instructors, and that equates to $447,666 for that 5% increase. That option A also is a 3% increase for the remaining staff that are being considered in this first round of contracts, for a total of $299,896. You'll see on the sheet that I gave you that under the high school instructors side, it says CSF, parentheses 301. What that is that the 5% is coming out of the 301 bucket. You'll remember that 301 has a number of different buckets, and one of the buckets it has allows the governing board to put more dollars into the base salaries. One of the other buckets is for performance. Because we are growing at the rate that we're growing, the 5% as indicated for the increase to high school instructors, that 5% comes out of the Classroom Site Fund 301 bucket, not the M&O, but it still leaves us with significant revenue in 301 to still do the performance plan. As a reminder, we did a similar thing, or you did a similar thing last year, in which we said there's lots of money in 301, and how can we get it to our teachers sooner rather than later, but also still maintain the integrity of performance. And so the decision was to still keep performance as a viable option, but to start taking some of those 301 dollars and put it into the salaries, and not have it be performance. So this is that same concept. And you'll see that in the recommendations on the high school instructor side, you have a 5, a 6, or a 7, and what that equates to, all of those dollars are coming out of the 301 classroom site funds. You'll also see that the recommendation for all of the other staff is 3, 4, or 5%, and you'll see that dollar amount coming out of the maintenance and operation. The governing board has also been very supportive in the idea that if you are an employee of EVIT, you yourself should also be covered with health care. And so the governing board every year has agreed to increase the dollar amount allocated to employees to cover single coverage health care. Employees that want their family on the plan, well, that's not part of what you're providing, but you are providing for the employees. And so you'll see that down there, the cost of health care increases about $162,000. So that would be a component of the compensation plan, that whatever you approve whether it's A, B, C, or you come up with D or E or F on Monday, the recommendation would also be to continue to support the belief that it's important that if you come work with us, your single coverage will be covered by the district, so health care doesn't come out of the pockets of the individuals unless they choose to cover their families. As a side note, when we look at the inflationary rate, as of in January 2024, the inflationary rate in Phoenix was 2.7%. Why that matters in a number of ways is because obviously we want to be at or above the inflationary rate, or whatever you allocate would actually be less money in the take home than what the individual is experiencing because of the inflation rate. If you remember, whether maybe it was last year or the year before, I don't know when it was, I think the inflationary rate was in Phoenix was at like 9%. And so the governing board did I think a very prudent, sound decision to increase compensation above that, so that if folks weren't actually taking home less than what they were the year before. So the inflationary rate in Phoenix as of January 2024 is 2.7%. That's a lot of information I just gave you, and I wanted to give it to you tonight and answer any questions that you have, or ask that you ask us to find additional information that you might be interested in that we can bring back on Monday so that we can have a further discussion followed by an action item. The goal is to get the contracts out for the folks that this recommendation will impact next week so that we have time for them to make decisions, but we also have time, depending on what their decisions are, to find a staff if we need to. So I'm going to stop there because I said a lot of words and I don't know how much made sense, but I at least wanted to get the information out there and then open up for conversation.
I do have a question, Dr. Wilson. So when we're talking about the CSF 301 funding, granted, I see under, for example, high school instructors, where we see option A, 5%, it's only coming from 301 funds. Option B, 6%, 301 funds, plus 89,533 out of M&O. Is there any way to, excuse me, increase the, and perhaps I'm missing a piece here, but when we move to 6 and 7%, is there any way to increase the CSF or the 301 funds without touching M&O? Or is that the base amount that we can only take out of 301?
Great question. I'm going to ask our Ms. Perez to come and answer that because she would know better than I would.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. So we can do out of the classroom site fund. The only thing that we want to be careful of is being able to sustain that in the long run.
Okay.
Obviously, with the increase of enrollment, that allows us the opportunity, but we also do have rollover funds from prior years that we can utilize that. So I would just add a little bit of a caution for that, but it's absolutely doable.
Okay, so you're saying we don't want to drain the 301 just because of being aware of not, we want to keep a balance in there is basically what we want to do. And is this the maximum amount that we can take, or is this a more conservative figure?
It is a more conservative.
More conservative figure. How much would this leave in the 301 ballpark figure if we were to increase this to a little, say, round it up to 500,000 or some other figure to keep our M&O preserved?
Right. At this point, with the current recommendation of the 447,000, just assuming there's no growth, no student growth, which
Okay.
we obviously are hopeful and anticipating, it would actually, the increase would be sustainable for the next 5 to 6 years. That's without taking into account additional growth, additional revenue that comes into the account. So adding the additional 50,000, it would be minimal impact to that. So rather than saying between 5 or 6 years, we're talking about 5 years.
I see what you're saying. Okay. And we then, if we move over to the M&O category or column, with these figures that you have on the proposal, will those figures still be is that a conservative figure for the M&O on option B and C for high school instructors, for example? Because I want to make sure we preserve that M&O because that's the foundation. So I just want to make sure that those are still going to be again, preserved. I guess I focus on M&O as being the basis for our bread and butter here at EVIT. Is that going to make sure that we have enough in M&O? I realize that figure changes, but I just want to make sure that we're okay with that figure.
Right, and currently we are, again, when we did our budget for the current fiscal year, we budgeted based on the assumption that we would have a declining enrollment.
Okay.
Which fortunately for us, we actually had a substantial increase. So, yes, so it's definitely,
Okay.
doable in terms of doing those adjustments. We just want to, long-term is the piece that we want to be able to understand. As Dr. Wilson explained, we have facilities that we want to remodel. We have those additional needs, so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think one of the challenges with that too, and this is I think sometimes a difficult situation districts get themselves into, is that if you become too reliant on the 301 for your compensation, and something happens with 301, and it may never, right? I mean, we all may be, but making sure that there's some balance to that as it relates to the M&O would hedge our bet should something happen. And as Ms. Perez said, I think, you all are very shrewd, I think, in your decisions to build a budget based on not having a large amount of growth. And if we have growth, then that's actually helps us kind of replenish our coffers, which is really smart of you. The downside to that is that every single year, kids aren't moving into our neighborhood. It's a school of choice, and we're proud of that. But I think it's also helpful for us and beneficial for us to hedge our bet that growth may slow down, and can we navigate a year or two of not that same kind of growth without having to reduce salaries is part of the equation as well. Mr. Lane?
Do we have any idea what's happening at the legislature with the state budget that's going to affect our ADM numbers, and
So,
which they never should be done by now, but they never finish until June
Yeah.
31st or something like that? Or?
So what I know of, and I can reach out to our lobbyists and try to get more definitiveness by Monday, but what I know of is that there's quite a bit of wrangling going down at the legislature, but I don't believe that any of that has dripped its way into reducing school funds. Is there going to be an increase? I don't know that, but I don't believe that there's going to be a decrease. I think obviously an increase would help buffer some of our financial issues. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, Ms. Perez, is I don't think that when we did our analysis on the sustainability of the dollars, that we built it around a projected increase from the state. I think we built it around the idea that things would stay as they are. So if it comes out that we have a benefit from the state, that would actually help offset. And if you remember, we were in a situation, I think it was 4 years ago, in which the governing board made a decision, issued contracts, the state came in and actually did did more than what we were thinking, and the board went back and reallocated some of those dollars, which we certainly could do as well. But my understanding is that education isn't going to be harmed. It may not necessarily be accelerated in the funding. But I can talk to our lobbyists and make sure that that's correct.
Some of the districts issue, they're under the gun to issue contracts by statute, like in the next couple weeks. To fix those contracts at what they're currently at, and then revisit them once the state comes up with the budget.
Mm-hmm.
That might give us more flexibility.
We had a little similar situation, I think, 4 years ago, in which the governing board said, this is what we're wanting to do. We'd like to do more, and if we can do more, then we would come back at a later date and potentially do that.
Do you think we might have people leave on the basis that we're not etching in stone what we're doing? Or?
No, I don't think that we'll have people leave that we're not etching in stone. But I do think there is a sense of security when you have your contract and it's been, offered and received and returned on the part of just an employee. I think from the organization, and you know this, that we have a hard time competing with the private sector for many of our open positions. And so individuals, I don't think we would get massive individuals that would say, well, it's not etched in stone, so I'm out. But even if we had one or two, and the 1 and 2 were in areas that we have struggled repeatedly to find. I'd much rather err on the side of caution and give the opportunity for us to be able to say at a minimum, and we may provide more, but at a minimum, and hopefully the minimum is enough to incentivize you to stay with the opportunity potentially of more versus saying, hey, we're going to take care of you when it comes around. And that may not be for weeks, and we wind up losing folks that we have a hard time replacing.
So what number here in percentage, or what first, second, or third line, A, B, or C, would leave us in a pretty comfortable position? And then if, we got a windfall from the state, we could come back and supplement.
Our current contracts have a provision that if the state funding doesn't come through, we can cut the
Pull 'em
salaries
back,
by
yeah.
10%, yeah. So, might be a better way of securing the employees if we give them the full amount, and if we have to take it back later.
So the question is option A, B, C, is that the question? From my perspective?
What are we comfortable with based on what we know is gonna be here, which is equal or
Yeah.
relatively equal, or maybe slightly greater than
Sure.
what we got before?
So if you're asking from my perspective, and I'll just share my perspective, I think the comfortableness is option A. And the reason for that is because I think, again, when you look at the work the governing board has done over the past 5 years, I would wager that there probably aren't many districts, there might be some, that will offer a 5 or greater % increase to our instructors. The 3% for the support staff, and it breaks my heart because I think sometimes people think that is a reflection of a value, and it isn't. It's a reality based on what the board has done over the years for support staff, so that the offsetting. But when we go to the open market to bring staff in, there is a greater price point we have to reach for, and I'll use the example because I always use it for welding. And so we've got to be in a position where we're more proactive in some of those, so in the teacher positions, not because they're more valuable, because that's what the market is driving in terms of the private sector. But I would say that option A is, from my perspective, the comfort level, which would be the 5% for the instructors, the 3% for the staff, the remaining support staff, cover the healthcare cost increase as you've always done, protect the placement opportunity for support staff, which, as a reminder, that's not indicated in here, but for individuals, sometimes that is a larger chunk than anything else. And so by doing that, I think you're putting yourself in a position where you're being fair, you're being equitable, and if there's a windfall that comes in from the state, you can scale it up, from my perspective, Mr. Lane.
Is it possible, do these have to go straight across, or can they zigzag a little bit between the?
Oh, you can, Mr. Mayor, you all can do it. You can zigzag, you can, I mean, this is, and I'll be honest with you, this was actually just a very simple step into this, right? And
It's a starting point.
It's a starting point. And like I said, I answer, option A to me was the option I started with based on, from my perspective, the ability to be fair to faculty and staff, but also to hedge our bet on enrollment, to continue to look for ways to have revenue to help offset costs of construction and remodeling. That was kind of the 5%, 3%, but you certainly can zigzag it. Absolutely.
Okay.
Do we know, and I recognize that we either might not be in a position to know over the timing.
I think Mr. Boyles.
Oh, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mr. Boyle, go ahead.
Okay. Do we know what other districts, either CTEDs or our partner districts, have done in terms of their contracts, any potential salary increases? And if we don't know, to what extent do we think that we would be in the ballpark of where they would be, or could we be able to find that out by Monday? Or I guess I'm trying to look for, we've talked about landscape analysis in the labor market before. We've tried to make sure that we were rescaling to get there, but if we approve option A, let's say, and then our partner districts or CTEDs across the valley go with something closer to option C, I mean, that puts us in a relative disadvantage. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering to what extent we have any information on what other folks might be thinking or doing.
So I'll be honest with you, we don't have a ton of information, not for want. This is a very interesting year, I think, because many of our partnering districts have experienced decline in enrollment. And so I think they're going through challenges in terms of coming up with compensation that is uniquely different than what they've done in other years. I can reach out to some of the other CTED superintendents and just get a sense from them, because to your point, Mr. Boyle, that's really kind of our market niche. But as far as the local districts that we partner with, we've tried in terms of just following some of their information, and there hasn't been a lot that's come out. My gut tells me, and it doesn't make it right, it's just my gut, but then when we do have a number of our partnering districts that have declining enrollment, that are having to lay staff off, that the idea of having more than a 5% or more than a 3% would potentially be problematic given the financial realities that they're facing. But we can try to find out a little bit more between now and Monday for sure.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Hobson.
No, I think Mr. Boyle's question, I wanted to know how we compared with the other CTEDs. I guess I'm also interested in how we compare with other CTEDs, how we compare with other public schools in the
Right.
state and nationally. I mean, several years ago when I was first on the board, I was shocked at how,
Yeah.
Why would anyone work here? I mean, everyone else paying better than us.
Yeah, so we can. I think one of the cautionary pieces with that, and I got to make sure I'm not being intellectually dishonest, because I can't have both sides of it. I think one of the challenges with it, and I'll use one of the other CTEDs, is that they may present as a average salary that is higher than ours, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the same richness in the 301 plan, or it might mean that they have individuals, faculty and staff that stayed with them longer, and so their salaries have gone up over the years, where ours, for a number of years, we were running, a 30-40% turnover rate. Well, it's only been the last couple of years that we brought that down. So if you have, if we're comparing average salaries, it could be that we're just low, and that's a fair concern, but there's probably some nuances to it as well that we would probably need to understand too, to make sure that we're not trying to provide revenue increases that would not necessarily be needed because these other pieces exist, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But I'll certainly see if I can't, especially on the CTED space, get some information before Monday.
Yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate it. I think we can sort out the nuances that you can educate us.
I doubt it, but
Dr. Wilson, what other employees do we have to also talk about their salaries later in this year?
So this here represents our high school teachers and all support staff. What is not here are our adult education teachers and our administration. And the reason for that is because the adult ed is a bit of an interesting space because of our moving towards the associate degree. That is going to carry with it some pieces that we've got to unpack before we offer contracts. And then honestly, most of the administrators are on 12-month contracts, and we want to make sure that we have a little bit more time before their time with us isn't here. So that's who we still have left.
Thank you.
What roughly is our first year with our organization? What does that look like?
In terms of compensation?
Yes.
Yeah.
For a teacher, certificated person.
For a certified instructor that comes to us with the minimum of 3 years of industry experience and nothing else is $50,000 for a 10-month contract. $50,000 for a 10-month contract. It's 185 days and does not include, as Dr. Wilson stated, the performance compensation that they would be eligible to receive at the end of that first year.
It might be helpful if we looked at, West Mac, Pima JTED, some of their similar sized districts and what that number is.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. So when we say we have the 50,000, that is the base of a brand new teacher that has no experience with us, correct?
Correct.
Someone
And that's
fresh out
no
of
prior
industry.
experience,
No teaching,
no
no nothing,
degrees.
50,000.
Correct.
Because that's who our main candidate
No.
pool probably is.
No, the majority of our we have been very fortunate within the last year or so that our average does come to us about 65,000 because they do come with additional experience. Our goal has always been to try to, as we're looking at those resumes, is that we want those instructors that have at least 5 to 10 years experience, simply because that offers them that specialized certification. That grant, gives it, just having the 5 years along with an industry credential gives them the immediate 12-year on their certification without having to take anything additional. So we try to find the right candidate and emphasizing the additional years of industry experience. And many do come to us with degrees in addition to a substantial number of industry experience.
So I want to make sure I heard that. You said, what would you say our average salary is?
I would say about 60 to 65,000 of the new hires,
Okay.
based on their
Okay.
background.
Of the new hires, what would you guesstimate, and I'm sorry I should have asked you this, I hate to put you on the spot, it's like, what would you guess the average high school teacher salary is here?
The average would be about 65, 68 when you take into account some of your entry level versus your veteran instructors.
And that 65, 68 doesn't include 301?
Does not.
Doesn't include any of, and that's on a 10-month contract?
That's on a 10-month contract, correct.
So I think one of the challenges that we have, and this goes back to the nuances, is that there are other CTEDs that you will have as an average salary 72, 78, but that's on an 11-month contract. And so if we kind of prorate the additional month out, so it's that kind of stuff that we probably also want to think through, is that, where are we at in terms of our base salary? Well, I think our base beginning salary at 50,000 is competitive. The average starter that comes to it is not at the 50,000, it's more at the 60. The overall salary is more like the 65, 67, which means we got some of our faculty and staff, rightfully so, that are 70s, 80s will be there. But that's on a 10-month, which compared, if you pull that to an 11-month, then that 80, it kind of rolls that way. But I can reach out to Pima JTED and to WestMac as well.
And Dr. Wilson, if I may add, just for clarification on that performance, on that 301 performance, in the last few years, it has averaged anywhere between $8,000 and $12,000, which would be in addition to that base compensation, which is very different than what other districts have been able to provide for staff.
Before Ms. Paris gets away, I heard you answer Dr. Metcalf's question about whether this reflected conservative projections. As to each of the projections, A, B, and C, are all of those fairly conservative in your projections, or?
They are, and they're conservative in the fact that we obviously want to take into account other district needs. And so it really is at a point where we then determine what, are we at a point where we're able to continue remodel, continue some of the other things in addition to properly, compensate our staff.
And we have not yet gotten to administrative or clerical projections here.
Correct.
I hope we're going to be as carefully alert to increasing their salaries as we are to our teaching staff.
Yes.
Yeah, I think yes. The short answer to that is yes. I think that I believe you all have done, like I said, an amazing job in many aspects of our organization, doing an analysis of what the market, and as Mr. Boyle indicated, landscape analysis. We've not necessarily done that in all aspects of the organization, which I think we're going to have to, in order to be able to be in a position where we're able to continue to attract and retain not only exceptional faculty and staff, but also some of our administrators. And quite candidly, one of the things I think you will see is that you as a governing board have been as generous as you have been to the teachers, which I understand, that we have inadvertently in some situations created a scenario in which an individual that has grown through us as a faculty and staff member that has stepped into a leadership position, director position as an example, will be making less on in 12 months than he or she would be making had they stayed in the classroom in 10 months. And that, there's some concerns about that. If we want to continue to grow our own, and folks that understand EVIT's uniquenesses and challenges, but also opportunities, we've got to make sure that, in my opinion, we have to make sure that we're creating a platform for individuals once they're in administration to continue to have upward mobility, not have that be somewhat slowed because they're not in the classroom. And so, yeah, we absolutely are going to have to do that.
Do you, I take it, I assume you attribute that our reduced layover in faculty and staff relates in part to starting to pay people a living wage?
Yes, I think there's a lot of things that go into that. I think part of it is that, people can talk all they want about feel good things, but at the end of the day, we have to pay mortgages and we got to buy food. And I think if you all have done over the past 5 years more to offset the cost increases so that people can pay mortgages and buy food, and those are the base level needs that have to get met. I also think that the idea of creating an environment that people want to be a part of, creating an environment that people believe in, helps with that as well. But I think the base reason for is having compensation that is fair and commensurate to what the market is paying, but also what the cost of living is. And you all have done that over the past 5 years.
Thank you.
So checking my comprehension, I'm going to reach out to our lobbyists and see if there's any kind of more information as it relates to the state of education down at the legislature. We're going to see if we can kind of get a sense of what some of our neighboring districts are thinking as it relates to their compensation for next year, so that we make sure we're not continuing to put ourselves out in the field. We'll take a look at the average salary of Pima JTED as well as Westmac, and see if we can't unpack some of those uniquenesses that may not make it an apples-to-apples comparison. And I'll see if I can't get a sense of, from both those institutions, what they're thinking on as it relates to compensation for staff moving into next year, just so you guys can have a bit more information as you go down the road of trying to make your decision Monday. Was there anything else that you wanted that we needed to get for you?
More cookies.
Outstanding.
Okay, hearing none. No more information needed? No cookies not needed either. I will go to the closing item. We'll, by acclamation, close this meeting. All in favor say
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
okay. You are an eager beaver. You may leave and take the cookies with you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.